webinar is learning. This webinar is about learning about local composting. This webinar is being recorded, and so we'll send out some information about how you can access it. We'll post it on our YouTube so that people can be able to review it and look back over any information. And then we'll cover some more, I guess, background and some housekeeping in a second. So this program, Learning About Local Composting, is part of International Compost Awareness Week. So International Compost Awareness Week is the first week in May every year. It's part of Research and Compost Foundation, where it's as we could tell by the name, it's a global awareness event. And so we've done, with us, Chatham County, we've done events all this week related to making us more aware and getting more education about composting, but also just connecting with one another. So we had 3 library programs at the start of this week. One was all ages, another was specific for kids, and then another was for adults, just learning about composting and all the things that help make healthy soils and contribute to climate resilience. Yesterday, you may have come out to our sustainable spirits that we had at the plant. And so today we're rounding off this work week with a webinar about local composting in the Chatham area and all the ways that people are getting involved. So something else is if you've gone to any event that we had this week, we're also saying if you attend events that you can enter into a raffle for a free compost bin and kitchen collector. I'm going to put the link to the raffle in here. And so you could fill that out. We're going to email people privately, email the winner privately on Monday regarding how they can get their compost bin and their kitchen collector. So today we have some speakers, and I'm going to cover a little bit of housekeeping. So we have Pam Watrous, who's an extension master gardener and waste and recycling enthusiast. So waste and recycling enthusiast is actually a Chatham Waste and Recycling Enthusiast program is actually a Chatham County program where you can learn not only about composting, but also about landfills and recycling and waste reduction and environmental justice and household hazardous waste. And a lot of it is Chatham specific and local specific. So we're awesome. We're grateful that Pam is able to be here today. We do think it's awesome that she's here. She also was there Wednesday, and she helped talk more about common composting conundrums. And so we're happy to have her here to talk about backyard composting. We also have Shannon Culpepper. She's a recycling and education specialist for Chatham County Solid Waste and Recycling. She's going to talk to us today about the food waste drop-off program that happens at 4 of our collection centers within Chatham County. And we also have Amy Brooks Fulford. She's the Assistant Compost Facility Manager for Brooks Compost Facility. So she could talk about what happens with the food waste that gets dropped off, and she could talk more about the facility that she works at. So something else, we'll cover some more things about if you're here. We'll give some background as far as like why it's so important to learn about composting, to participate in composting, to participate in all these things. And so, of course, we're very grateful that you're here to participate. And so to give just a little bit of background, food waste is a huge, well, let me just say that this information that we have here is from REP. And so it's showing 29% of the US food supply is surplus. It's more than what we can account for. And so this translates to food waste issues. Food waste is uneaten food and inedible parts going to the following. Either it's anaerobic digestion in a landfill, it's going to combustion, it's going into dumping, or it's being spread out into land and not being harvested. So if we could go to the next slide. So if we're thinking of food waste, REP also did some stats as far as for how much of this food that's not being eaten, that's not being used, 33%, or about 34% of it is coming from residents, is coming from households, and the second highest is from farms. And so when we look at municipal solid waste, if we look at landfill disposal, about 24, or basically practically a quarter of all the waste that's going into a landfill is food waste. And so if it's in a landfill, it's not being broken down. There's nothing being done with it. It's not being able to be naturally recycled like how it does with compost. And so we're doing these efforts, these international composting efforts to address like landfills are there. We can't dump things there forever. And also they're not if it's really like a tomb for food. Like it's not having any use for it. And so if we're learning about composting, we're finding a way to make use of food specifically by having it be naturally recycled. There's also other things with food waste. You can dispose of it or not dispose of it, donate it is what I was thinking of. You could donate it or find other ways of preserving your food or storing food properly. But today we're storing food to have it last longer so that way you can eat it and it doesn't go to waste is what I mean. But today we're focusing specifically on compost. So there's many different compost systems that you can use, and that's why we have three people today to talk about the various different ways. So we have backyard composting. Pam's going to talk a lot about that. We have food waste drop-off programs, and we could talk about the food waste drop-off programs that we have in Chatham County. And then we also have, if you're having it taken to an industrial compost facility and the ways that they can break everything down there. So we're really grateful and really happy that we have three different perspectives that we can offer for the food waste problem in North Carolina and the world globally. So first up, we're going to have Pam, and I'll give an intro for her. So Pam Watrous, she volunteers in Chatham County, North Carolina as an extension master gardener and a waste reduction and recycling enthusiast, and has over 15 years of composting and sustainable waste management experience. She specializes in backyard composting methods that help divert organic waste away from landfills and support the production of nutrient-rich soil. Pam is a passionate student and educator and is dedicated to earth-loving waste management through the regenerative practices of composting. Her happy place is her small Chatham homestead called Root Beer Ranch, where she lives with her wife, border collies, pot-bellied pigs, Nigerian dwarf goats, and free-ranging chickens. So we're happy to have Pam here today, and she'll talk to us about backyard composting.
So hello, everybody, and welcome to a subject that is super exciting to me, and it really means a lot to me. I thank you for being here. I thank you for listening into this. You know, there's a lot of different reasons why people compost, and some people do it to teach, some people do it to learn, some people do it to experiment, other people do it as a matter of practicality, just to keep their yard waste from, filling up their trash can. And some people do it to divert food waste out of the landfill. And then a lot of folks do it to put it right into their garden. But for whatever reason that you may be interested in backyard composting, I personally want to say thank you, because it's very important to give the nutrients back to the earth, and you're making a big difference. And you're also being a thought leader and an action leader to those around you who hear that you're doing composting. But for whatever reason you do it, thank you very much. So we're going to go on to the first slide. And the great news I have about composting is that composting happens. It doesn't, we can help it along, but Mother Nature is this powerful force that does a lot of it on her own. She pretty much mixes water and air and organic materials and turns it into composter with the aid of some natural decomposers that are in the earth and in the air. And so we may overthink it a little bit, but really our biggest input into composting is we impact the timing of it all. We can slow it down by not having the right components in it, or we can speed it up. But our role in it is largely to change the timing. So if there's anything you're concerned about the way you're doing composting, I want you to believe in yourself and believe in the process, because it does happen naturally, no matter what we're going to do. So with that good news, let's break it down to exactly what's happening when composting is going on. So we basically have air and water. Those are two basic necessities of life. Everything needs water and air to survive. In regard to composting, the air gets involved when you turn the compost, or you prod the compost, or you somehow break it up so that the air can get down there. The water can come from the weather. It can come from hauling water to your compost pile. So one recommendation is try to put your compost pile close to where there's a water source. And it can also come from food waste and liquid food waste. You can add beer and different liquids to your compost pile, I just recommend you don't add any dairy because that can cause you problems in a backyard setting that you wouldn't necessarily have in a commercial setting that Amy will talk about later. We also have organic material, and organic material might be a mouthful, but it's really just materials that were derived from living organisms. So we can easily think of some, such as fruits and vegetables and such, but you can broaden your view of that, and it can be leather, it could be cotton clothing. If you're wondering about what can go into my compost pile, a basic thought is whether or not it came from a living organism. And then the fantastic decomposers, I think they're my favorite part of composting, are all the organisms that live within the compost pile and live within the dirt and the air that help break down this organic material and turn it into our compost. I've always thought it would be kind of amazing if we could see all of the organisms that are floating in the air or existing on the ground. I don't know. We may not inhale if we could see all of that stuff, but there are plenty of organisms provided by Mother Nature that help us in this process. So the next slide. So let's look at the organic materials. So in composting, all organic materials are broken down into two simple groups. There's brown groups, which are the ones that provide carbon, and there's green, that the ones that provide nitrogen. So looking at the browns are the dry leaves and plants. There's paper, there's cardboard. In a lot of regards, the browns are the no longer actively living matter. Browns might get a little overlooked in the process, but they're hugely, hugely important. And then there's greens. And greens, I think, are the things that people first think of when they think of composting. And that's your food, your vegetable and fruit scraps, your coffee grounds. Some super powerful ones are chicken manure or alfalfa pellets, and then live plant material. And so those are the two main groups that you want to be thinking about. And when you're thinking about those two groups, on the next slide, we'll see that there's a very specific recipe. So if we can go to the next slide. When you're thinking about your compost and how you're putting it together and how you're making it successful, you generally, in a backyard composting environment, you want to go on a ratio of 2 to 1. You want 2 parts brown to 1 part green. It doesn't really matter what those parts are in terms of shovelfuls, bucketfuls. If you're doing it on a micro level, you could do it cupfuls, but whatever, it's 2 parts brown, 1 part green. And when you're building out these parts, you want to layer them. When you're first building compost, you want to layer 2 parts brown, 1 part green, and then just continue to stack that up. While you are building it up, it's helpful to, in between these layers, add some existing compost or some dirt from your nearby pile. And this will add organisms, these little tiny organisms that we need, to the process and speed it along. The other part of the recipe is water, or my slide says water, but technically it's a liquid. So that water could be beer, that water could be any sort of liquid, again, that's not dairy. And it could be rainfall, it could be in the wintertime ice meltdown. But you want the water level to be that of a wrung out sponge. So when you're thinking about water, we don't want it too wet. And so just wring it out. And if it feels like a wrung out sponge, then you've got the right water level and don't add any more. And then in terms of the third part of the recipe, it's air. And we get air into the compost pile by turning it. And in the high season, when things are really active, you can turn it once every 1 to 2 weeks. In the slower season, in the winter time, you can do it very rarely. In those in-between times, you could do it every 4 to 6 weeks. And when I say turn it, you could use a shovel, you could use a pitchfork. In some containers, it might just be a matter of stirring it around, but you want to get air in there, into the compost, because with in my particular living situation with all these home animals that I have, to me, composting is like micro ranching, and you need to think about all of those critters that are in the compost pile, and you need to, I like to think, feed them with the browns and greens, water them either through nature's providing or yourself. And you need to exercise them in terms of turning it over, getting them moving around, and most importantly, getting them the air. Okay, the next slide. So I've seen a lot of people be a little nervous or a little hard on themselves when it comes to composting, because I hear a lot, I do it, but I don't think I do it right, or I do it and it's not working. And I would say you're pretty much probably doing it right, because Mother Nature helps a lot and makes up for any mistakes we might have. And the great thing about composting is that it's highly fixable. Whatever's going wrong, you can fix. So don't give up. By far, what I've seen when people ask me different questions about composting, most often the reason is they don't add enough browns. The browns are those dead leaves, the cardboard, etc. A lot of people think composting, backyard composting, is food scraps. That's fabulous, but those are the greens. And you need twice as many browns to greens. So if you throw in a 5-gallon bucket of food waste, we need 10-gallon bucket of the browns. So adding more browns often fixes a lot of the problems. But some more problems could be that the pile's too wet. That's the case, add more browns. If it's too dry, add more liquids. If it's not getting enough air, you can turn it, you can poke it, you can add a tube that's got holes drilled in it to get air down in there. But we got to get our little micro critters the oxygen that they need to help us along. Some problems are caused by the fact that you might be adding fats or meats to your pile. And those sorts of items, while they are compostable, those are best composted in commercial composting settings, which Amy will talk about later. You can add ash to your compost pile, but not charcoal ash. It's got to be ash from wood or any other organic material. And then some waste can be added to your pile, such as chicken manure, which is fabulous, but no domestic pet in terms of cats, dogs, human, etc. And then another reason for some of the problems that we have with composting is that the particle size is too big. Now you can add big and it will break down in time, but it's just going to take a lot of time. So in a perfect world, all particle sizes would be 2 inches or smaller. And I'm not saying you need to cut up all the things down that small, but the smaller you have it, the quicker it will decompose. Somebody was just talking to me, I think the other day, about eggshells, and they were asking if they can just add eggshells. You can. They asked me what I do, and I go a little far. I actually break them down, cook them in the oven, kill all the germs, and grind them up in a coffee grinder and add powder, but that might be a little too far. But so I just want to say any sort of problems that you have can be addressed and fixed. And so along those lines, I highly advocate you building a network, you reaching out and asking questions, you talk to other people that compost, you reach out to the Master Gardener program. There are so many areas that you can get any question you have answered about composting. Please reach out and ask. And if I could talk to each one of you personally, I would, because I love this subject, but I can't. So next slide. And so at the end, if you work at this, you're adding valuable nutrients back into the earth. You're giving back. The earth feeds us. It gives us a chance to feed it back. The material is no longer being put into landfills, which it's heartbreaking to me when I just learned through this WREP program that Shannon leads, and Aniansi is a part of the large percentage of food waste that's in a landfill. And you're helping with that. So I want to thank you for that. You also help roots penetrate and aerate the soil, as well as little critters. You help them move around. Now, some underground critters we don't want, but there's a lot down there that move around that we really need, and you're helping that. And then probably the biggest thing is, for me, it creates satisfaction as we're being a good steward, not only to our planet, but to our children, our grandchildren, those around us. We're leading by example on how giving back actually creates tremendous value. So the last slide I believe here is just sort of my personal thank you and my personal shout out to you, and say, whatever you're doing, thank you. And you can do this, and you are doing this, and Mother Nature helps us along in so many ways. So thank you.
And thank you, Pam, for giving us that presentation. We love hearing that backyard composting perspective and all your expertise. So thank you. Our next speaker that we're going to have is going to be Shannon Culpepper. And she's going to talk about a food waste drop-off program that we have in Chatham County. So Shannon Culpepper is a recycling and education specialist with Chatham County, where she has worked for over 10 years managing the recycling, waste reduction, household hazardous waste, and education programs. She created a solid waste educator's guide for North Carolina called Don't Waste It, reaching hundreds of educators annually through in-person and online workshops. She completed a Master's of Public Administration and Environmental Studies graduate certificate from UNC Wilmington. Shannon and her husband are foster parents and currently have twin daughters graduating high school this year. And she has two cats, one old and lazy, the other young and feisty. So we're grateful to have Shannon here today to talk about the food waste drop-off program.
Thank you. It's always awkward to have someone talk about you at you, but I got through it. Yes, so if you live in Chatham County, we have a new pilot program. We started at the very end of October last year, so we're still just, within the first 6 months. And we have started this pilot to help divert food waste, as we've talked about. It's a quarter of what goes into the landfill, and we want to save our landfill space and have this be a more valuable use. And so we started the pilot at 4 of our main centers. So if you're familiar, it's Bonnley, Cole Park, Pittsburgh, and Siler City. The picture here is the one at Cole Park. They are all under a black building like this, except at Pittsburgh, and I have a picture of that one later. But it's a little building next to the swap shop, and it has carts under it. And so those carts are simply what you put your food waste in. We'll talk more about what goes in there and what doesn't, but just know to use the collection centers, you do have to have a decal. If you're uncertain of what that means, or you don't know if that applies to you, feel free to reach out after, and I can follow up with you individually about your situation. We don't currently have food waste drop-off. There's not that in the towns. That is not offered yet. Maybe that's something we'll grow into with this program, but right now we're just calling this a pilot, because we're really just trying to figure out how much we're going to get, how it's going, what centers we might expand to, that kind of stuff. So, and since the end of March, I was hoping to get my April report, but I didn't get it yet. But through the end of March, we've collected over 5.5 tons of food waste so far. Cole Park is our busiest center. It's also the one collecting the most food waste. We actually have recently moved 2 carts from one of the slower sites to Cole Park, so they have 6 carts now, so that they have plenty of room. Pittsburgh is the next busiest, but yeah, it's exciting to have diverted all of that in such a short amount of time. So what can we take in our food waste drop-off? So as opposed to your backyard drop-off, your backyard compost program, where you're not going to want to put meat and dairy, because this is commercial composting, we can put in meat, dairy, things like that. Our food waste is picked up by Compost Now, and the endpoint is Brooks. So Amy's going to tell you all about where it goes and what happens to it when she gets it. But it's exciting that it stays in Chatham. It's composted in Chatham. We like that. But you can always put fruits and veggies. You can put meat, seafood bones, little bones, not like a giant deer carcass, please. Just, little bones that come with your food. dairy, egg, and any kind of processed food. So some of this stuff you may not put in your backyard compost bin. It's not going to break down. You're going to be attracting pets, but Amy can break it down. All these things can be cooked or raw. So if it, something that went bad in the pantry or the fridge or leftovers, whatever it is, you can put that in there. Bread and grains and pasta type things, coffee filters, tea bags. We don't want any, staples, stickers, bands, any kind of that stuff. We got to make sure we look out for that. There are certain tea bags that are also plastic. Just keep an eye out. You can kind of feel the difference in there. So we don't want those, but any of the paper kind of filters, paper, tea bags, all that kind of stuff is great. Beans and nuts can go in there. That's basically every food category covered. And then we take paper products. So as Pam mentioned, this is a carbon source. This is a way for us to divert even more from the landfill rather than just food, which, is 24%. There's another percentage that is paper product, compostable paper products. So that's going to be things like napkins, paper towels, paper plates, to-go containers, all that kind of stuff that is not accepted in a recycling program anywhere. So it has to go in the trash, and instead you can put it here. We have some people who are exclusively bringing us only pizza boxes. That's fine. They're not ready to compost. They're bringing their food waste yet, but bring us your pizza boxes. We do want to make sure that they're all paper, and the easiest way to do that is to tear it. And if it tears as easily as a piece of paper, it's paper. If it does not tear easily, then it likely has a wax coating or a plastic coating. And so we're going to say no to anything that doesn't tear as easily as paper. And then the other things we're going to say no to is during our pilot, we have chosen not to accept compostable plastics. But I did want to make a note about it, which is what are compostable plastics? These are made of different, organic materials that look and behave like plastic for use, whether it's a bag, a plate, a to-go container, a cup, whatever it is. You can use it as a plastic one, but it is compostable. If you are buying these in terms of, wanting to have a lower impact, just make sure you're looking that they are certified. BPI certification is the most common one. It's going to be stamped on there, written on there, whether it's the package itself or the package that they came in. You do want to make sure they're certified and use those. But just so you know, in our pilot, we are not currently accepting them. We made this choice just to start easy. Plastics are the most confusing category in recycling. Compostable plastics are the most confusing category in food waste drop off. So just to get started, to set a base, we started without these. Who knows if we will add them in the future? That will be determined. But for now, we're just saying no to these. I can tell you our stream of food waste has been extremely clean. Anytime I go there, in the whole time of all the places I've been to, I've only found one bag in there, and that's great. If you accept compostable plastics, you tend to get a lot of lookalikes, which are not certified. They might just be pure plastic. And so it's really been helpful for us in starting this pilot to get people used to just food and paper products. Some other things we don't accept, I mentioned some of these already, but the stickers, ties, and rubber bands that come on your food, packaging that it might come in, we can't accept any of that. We only want the food waste, right? So, throw those away. If it's metal, plastic, glass, if it's accepted in a recycling program, please recycle it, otherwise throw it away. We can't take pet waste. Nobody wants to deal with that in a compost bin. There's a lot of stuff in there you don't want to take a chance with. And then ash and coal, that's a coal bricks, but anything like that, even if it was organic, ash, we don't take that, and that's because of the risk of what was in it, but also fire. So you're putting this heat source into a thing that's going to get hot. So we say no to those, and then yard waste. So while yard waste is organic, the food waste drop-off program is not for yard waste. Yard waste is banned from landfills in North Carolina. We have a yard waste pile here at our office that people can bring yard waste to, but we can't put that kind of stuff in the food waste bin. If we accepted yard waste, those bins would be full of only yard waste. We wouldn't have any room for food. So Amy's going to talk about where she finds her sources of carbon, but we're providing the source of mostly nitrogen, little carbon with the paper. And then fats and oils and greases. So while there's a little bit that might be in your food, what we don't want is like your full, used container of grease. We do have cooking oil recycling at those 4 centers I mentioned and here at our office. So we would rather that go into it. It gets made into a fuel and then it doesn't go into the food waste. So this is what the sign looks like. It says everything I just said to you, basically. If you come to the I'll talk about that in a second what you do. But this is the sign you'll see. We have this flyer there as well. You can take one. We have this flyer on our website in English and Spanish available for folks to use. So please find one online, get one at a center so you can keep it at home and remember what goes in there. And then in terms of bringing your waste, so this is the food waste container drop off at Pittsburgh. So it looks a little different. It's a carport, not a black building like I mentioned. But in terms of what you need to do, you have to actually bring it and put it in this cart. We can't take if you put it in a bag, we can't take your bag, that kind of stuff. So we sell these kitchen collectors at our office for $5. But my advice for you, for anybody, is to find something that works for your household. Maybe that's an old whipped cream container. Maybe it's a bag. Maybe it's a, nice steel compost bin with a carbon filter. Find whatever size works for you based on your household, how much waste you create and that kind of stuff. But if you're worried about storing it until you make it to the collection center, put it in the freezer. So when you put food waste in the freezer, it pauses the decomposition process. So the stuff won't get flies, it won't stink, it just purely stops. And when you dump it into the bin, and it starts to thaw, then it will start to continue to decompose. But this will prevent you from the flies or smell, especially if, say, you only go to the center, every other week. You may not want to keep that in your house for that long. But just whatever you bring it in, dump it out and take that back with you or throw that in the trash if it can't be reused. So there's more information about our program on our website. We'll send links out afterwards. I can also throw it in the chat real quick so you can find it easily. But yeah, let us know if you have any questions. Put it in the chat. We'll get to it later. But thank you very much.
And thank you, Shannon, for all that information. And again, you could put your questions in the chat and we'll get to them at the end of the program. But our next speaker is Amy Brooks Fulford. Amy was born and raised on a dairy farm in southwest Chatham County. After going out of business in the late 80s, her family transitioned a 30-acre tract on the farm to the first level 3 permitted commercial composting operation in North Carolina. After obtaining a Bachelor of Science in Natural Resources, Soil, and Water Systems from NC State, she went to work full-time for Brooks Contractor and is currently the Assistant Compost Facility Manager at Brooks Compost Facility. Amy was a founding board member and past president of the North Carolina Composting Council, past vice president of the Carolina Farm Stewardship Association, and a 2019 graduate of the Soil Health Academy. She lives in her hometown of Goldston with her husband and 2 sons, and her favorite hobbies include gardening and working with horses. And so we're happy to have Amy here today, and she's going to talk about the Brooks Compost Facility and more about commercial composting. So thank you, Amy.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to talk about our facility. So I'll just jump right into it. As she mentioned, we are part of a larger farm. The facility sits on a larger 400-acre farm. We've got cattle and do some row crops and things like that. And we established we did have a dairy that we ran. My parents started that in the 70s on this land, and that started going out of business in the late 80s. And when basically we just transitioned into composting after that. So we established Brooks Contractor, which is the company that has all the equipment and trucks to run the compost facility and everything involved with that. Started Brooks Contractor in 1990. We are centrally located in North Carolina, which is pretty good. That's within about an hour of most major cities in central North Carolina. We were the first level 3 permitted compost facility in North Carolina. There are 4 levels of compost facilities. In North Carolina, we are level 3, which means we do not receive any biosolids or human waste. And of course, no hazardous materials. Our feedstocks include a lot of eggshells. We actually work with the poultry industry, all the hatcheries. Pretty much anytime you get a chicken or an egg that had to hatch out somewhere, and it's a lot of material in the Southeast. And so we compost eggshells, tons of food waste. We started taking food waste in 1999. So we've got over a quarter century experience working with a lot of food waste. Also, of course, leaves, wood chips, and yard waste. We would work with several municipalities in our area to receive those materials, and then some farms for animal manure and bedding. Currently, we're composting about 85,000 tons of materials per year, and then we'll sell out 60 to 75,000 cubic yards per year of compost and soil blends. We make a lot of different custom mixes, but one of the most popular mixes that we have, over 60% of our sales are what we call referred to as 50-50. It's just a sandy loam landscape soil that you can plant directly into. I'll talk a little bit later about why that mix is actually pretty popular in our area. And then we do a small amount of sales. Most of our sales are just in bulk, but a small amount, less than 1,000 cubic yards in 1 cubic foot bags. We do have a turned or aerated windrow facility, and we're really just focused on making compost that is safe for all purposes, including food production. Next slide. This is an aerial of our facility. It is a little outdated by a few years, but still the basic process is the same. We will have trucks to come in over our scale so that we weigh everything. As a permitted facility in North Carolina, we have to track waste by not just the type and how much, the tonnage, but also where it came from. So we'll track that by the county that it actually came from in North Carolina. And then it'll travel to our receiving area. Next slide, please. And this is a solidification basin, which is really good for handling high liquid waste, such as food waste. So we'll bring those materials in and blend them up with our bulking materials, which would be the leaves, animal manure and bedding, as well as yard waste and wood chips. And so once we actually run 3 different types of batches in our batch recipes in our system. One contains eggshells, one does not contain eggshells, but everything else. And then one, we kind of isolate this material. It's just pretty much leaves, a little bit of wood waste, and whatever clean whole produce that we can get that does not contain any of that post-consumer food waste, such as the cups and plates and things like that, so that we can send that to certified organic farms. Next slide, please. Sorry if you hear that. And this is actually a photo of food waste from Compost Now coming in. Come in big compactors, usually a couple per day that we receive. And this is waste coming from all over the Triangle, including the collection centers in Chatham County. And you'll notice at the bottom of the slide, you can kind of see a black bag. Obviously, that is not compostable. Food waste is the most contaminated feedstock that we receive in. We'll talk a little later about how we handle some of that. But it is problematic. It needs to be kept out of the landfill, but in my opinion, we need to work with society a little bit better to explain how important it is to keep plastics and other trash out of our food waste streams. Next slide. Next slide, please. And this is just another shot of the food waste. You can see a pizza box in there that Shannon talked about. Next slide. And so once we've got the food waste in there, or nitrogenous type materials, we'll blend that with our bulking materials. And next slide. And then we'll lay it out in a windrow. We can there are 2 options after we blend everything together. If we do not have a windrow that is open to receive that material, we can put it in what we call a premix pile, where it can statically compost for whatever amount of time we need it to until there's a windrow bay to receive it. Next slide. Since we are a turned or aerated windrow facility, the piece of equipment that we use to turn our rows is called a scarab windrow turner. And it works kind of like a big garden tiller. It will straddle these long windrows that we have, and everything that was on the inside of that pile will get tossed to the outside and vice versa. Next slide. This is actually how we meet what's termed PFRP, or process to further reduce pathogens, which is a rule for permitted facilities in North Carolina, which means that we have to turn these windrows 5 times within a 15-day period with those temperatures above 131 degrees. And that is to reduce the potential pathogens that may be in this material. And this is a shot, of the window or the turner coming down the road. And if you look towards the bottom of the row that this turner's turning, you'll see kind of, I call it litter. Could be some plastic. All of that is coming from food waste. This contains some post-consumer food waste. If you'll go to the next slide, we'll see this is a windrow or organic, for certified organic farmers. This is the row that we make for them, which only contains just whole produce. May have some produce stickers in there, but that would be it. It's a very clean compost. This is what we would prefer to make, but unfortunately we do take a lot of food waste, particularly the post-consumer food waste. Next slide. After we've met PFRP in those windrows, which generally takes 5 to 6 months, but sometimes a little longer in that windrow, we'll move that material to a curing pile with a big off-road dump truck like this. And we've got 2 of these on site. Next slide. And then we'll dump into one of these larger curing piles. We've got several, depending on the batch that's going in it. And the picture in the corner of this photo would be a really good example of the type of trash, I guess we could call it, that may be in this windrow due to the food waste that we're taking. So you can see a can, a straw there, some utensils, could be compostable utensils. Not all compostable products are made the same. Some break down a lot easier than others. But the last step that we do is to screen the material. Next slide. We'll screen everything down to a 1/2 inch. This is what we call a shaker deck screen, which was actually made in Chatham County at Basic Machinery. It was a custom screen that we had made. Next slide. And then the last step, of course, is to load it onto a truck to head out to a farm, a garden, for landscaping purposes, wherever you would need compost. Next slide. This is loading up one of our trucks. This is one of our dump trailers going out, which can hold 30 cubic yards of our topsoil blends and 40 cubic yards of compost. Our material is really popular in this particular area in North Carolina. Next slide. Because we have really poor soil in Central North Carolina. I get calls all the time from people that moved here from the Midwest or maybe the northern part of the United States, which generally have a lot richer, deeper soils. And they're like, where is your soil? This explains exactly what they're experiencing. If you look on the left, you'll see an optimal soil, which almost has a foot of workable material. You've got a thin layer of organic material at the top, followed by some topsoil and then subsoil. Well, if you look at the type of soil that we have, we might have a very thin layer of organic matter at the top. But in general, there's very little topsoil that we actually have to work with. Most areas, you go straight in the subsoil. And that would be a really, really good reason to add compost. Next slide. Probably the number one reason for adding compost is trying to make topsoil out of the subsoil that you have at the surface. It's a really good reason to add compost. Anytime you're going to switch land from forestry or pasture and put it into crop production, you're asking a lot more of that land. You're also going to disturb that land anyway, because you've got to make it so that you've got a good seed bed. And that's a wonderful time to add compost. Anytime you plant perennial areas such as an orchard, berries, pollinator strips. I really can't go past this pollinator strip without mentioning WREP, which is a phenomenal extension agent. We're so lucky to have her in Chatham County, and she's got the pollinator demonstration garden at the Chatham Market, and just does a really, really good job, and uses a lot of compost in her plantings. Also, if you want to plant windbreaks, which could become really important if you live in a property where maybe there was once a large forest near you, and then that got completely clear cut and maybe a subdivision put there. You're going to have excess wind, which can dry out your soil, and there's a lot of good reasons to want to have some type of a windbreak on your property. Also, in general, just for landscaping. Anytime that you have some type of contaminated soil, compost is a really powerful tool to bring in some compost, work that in, and then plant a cover crop to remediate that contaminated land. And also, compost is a really good carrier for other ingredients that you might want to add to the soil, such as mineral additions. A lot of our customers will add in alfalfa meal and kelp and azomite and bone meal and blood meal and all sorts of fertility enhancers into the soil. And compost is a great medium to add those materials with. And also for nutrient-dense vegetable production, generally, you're really trying to work on the soil health, and so it's common for farmers, especially in the type of soil that we have, to bring in a lot of compost to be able to do that. Anytime you need to replace the organic matter layer, you can broadcast application of compost works really good for that. Really, wherever the soil is to be disturbed and planted, that's a great time to bring in compost. And overall, just to add beneficial biology, nutrients, organic matter, good stable humus, increase your buffering capacity, and in general, just to feed the soil. And whenever people talk about feeding the soil, this is actually what they're talking about. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. I mentioned the rhizophagy cycle because just about every group that I've talked to over the last few years, most people in that group have no idea what the rhizophagy cycle is. This was actually discovered with high-powered microscopes in 2010. So we haven't known about this too terribly long, but it was where researchers looked at how plants actually feed from the soil. And they discovered that it's actually bacteria that enters into the root tip. And then whatever that bacteria is carrying, could be calcium or nitrogen or magnesium or whatever, the plant root is able to extract it from that bacteria, and then it will exit out of the root hairs on the side of the root, where the bacteria can then go and gather other nutrients and go right back in, and it's just a continuous loop process. And they think that this system is so intelligent that the plant can communicate to this bacteria what it needs. So, for example, if it comes in with calcium, and the plant can communicate, hey, next I need some magnesium. And that bacteria will actually be like a miner in the rhizosphere, go out, find it, and go right back into the system. And this is really what's happening in the soil food web. Next slide. And it's so important to build your soil. A lot of people call and, they have a traditional tilled garden. They have, weeds all the time, and it's just, production maybe is just lackluster. This is probably the best way. I think it's the best way to actually build soil health if you're working with something that you don't have a whole lot of organic matter in. Granted, this does require a lot of compost to get this started. So probably not something that, you would be able to make that quantity on your own property unless it's maybe a farm. But this is a system where you would layer on organic materials. It's common to layer on 5 to 6 inches of compost. And then in your pathways where you'll be walking, you would want to put in wood chips. And wood chips in this system are probably just as important actually as the compost in the rows where you're actually be growing at. Because the wood chips are fungal dominant. Our compost is actually bacterial dominant. And the fungal dominance of that wood chip path is going to ensure that you have all the intelligence of the fungal soil web or fungal system in your growing system. And next slide. This almost kind of weatherproofs your garden, really. It's a system that ends up being this huge sponge so that if you're in a drought, you have plenty of water that's already in the system, but also if you have a 5-inch rain, you can be walking out, working in your garden right after that rain, because the system is literally a sponge, to soak in, all that water so that it's usable. But really just a very productive system. If you've been struggling with gardening and want a better system, I would strongly suggest that you look into the market garden type style of growing. The next slide. That's it. Thank you.
And thank you, Amy. So I think we have time. So we didn't see any questions in the chat, but I do have a question that I have made, especially for accounting for time. So I'm going to ask one question for all three of you, and then I'll do some closing thoughts to wrap it up. So you all are here as part of International Compost Awareness Week. It's giving awareness about composting. And so what role would you say that education, community programs, events like these, what role would you say they play in making composting feel effective and doable? And any of you could start first.
Well, I'm gonna jump in there as both a master gardener and as a member of the REP program. Um, Composting is a way that sort of helps us complete the cycle in which we all participate with nature giving to us and us giving back and allowing us to contribute back to the earth. And we all need soil to do our gardening, and we all rely on the results of that gardening to eat. So by composting, you're not only adding to the solution, but you're also piquing the curiosity of others who may not quite understand how easy and beautiful the whole process is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an educator, so obviously I think education is effective, but I find that sometimes composting to someone who's never heard of it or barely heard of it seems really overwhelming, and that when they can just stand there and talk with you, ask some questions, come to a class, whatever, and you break it down, I think it's actually a lot easier to understand than recycling. And I mean, I spend most of my time talking about recycling, but I think composting is easier. And I think there's some misconceptions about composting that can be cleared up with a quick conversation. For example, when we started the pilot, we went out to centers to just stand there and tell people about this new program we had. And a lot of people would kind of walk by and say, "Oh, I already compost at home." And we were like, "That's great. But here you can put things you're not putting at home. So even if you're doing composting at home, it's going great. We're glad for you. you can't put in meat, dairy, all these other things that you can put in here. And so some of them would be like, oh, wait, what? So I think it's just any education is important for even people who think they already know what they're doing is correct, right?
Yeah, I think that these programs are extremely important. For I guess about 20 years now, I've been going out and talking to people, and a lot of times I'm the first one to really ever talk to them about composting. And it's a very natural process that is not as hard as people think it is. And I would also say that if you are kind of on the fence about using compost, I would do it on a small scale with a side-by-side comparison. Everyone has a little microclimate at their property, and I would suggest that people do side-by-side comparisons, grow the way that you've always grown, and then beside that, just use compost and really see what type of production. And usually if you can get someone to actually use compost, they become a believer in compost because it works so well.
Great. Thank all three of you. I'm going to say a little bit of something to wrap us all out. Thank all three of you for coming here today. My name is Aniansi Estasio, and I'm Education Program Coordinator. So I liked having that question to ease into my job is education as well and educating other people about composting. So if I've seen you at any event this week or anywhere like during tabling or anything else, I really am thankful for you coming because you're part of making that change, making that difference to have us have better soils, be more climate resilient, tackling sustainability. And so for this whole week, I've coordinated several things, and so I'm so glad that you were able to participate. I'm going to say something else in that if you're here, you're interested about composting, but if you're interested in other sustainable related things such as landfills or recycling or waste reduction, or just if you've ever had any questions about recycling, as Shannon said, we get a lot of those. We do have a program that Pam is a part of. It's called the Waste and Recycling Enthusiast Program, and we have our interest form open. So I'm going to put the link in the chat for if you want to learn about when we open up those classes again. They'll be opened in September, and so we take applications for them. If you want to learn more about the program, I will put the link to that there as well. But we would love to see you all again and have you come out because education is really important to making a difference and to making a change. So thank you all for attending this. I put the link to the page there, and there's also the raffle. So the raffle is there at the top as well. If you still want to enter in there, the link is going to close around noon today. But thank you all for coming, and thank you again to Shannon, Pam, Amy for being here and giving all your education and knowledge to us. And
Thank
we'll wrap
you.
it up.
Thank you.
Thank you.